Good afternoon to you all. We're about to tackle actually how impact-driven tech is making an actual and efficient change out there. But first, in the awakening of COVID-19, impact-driven tech is no longer the cherry on the cake, of course, but to be truly the tech startup and scale-up ecosystem cherry on the cake, those companies need to tackle and get the right resources and partners. So yep, how do you create change when it comes to impact-driven tech? Well, I bet our next guests definitely have an answer out there. Lukky, Ahmed, of course, you're the CEO of Climate X.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Bastien, Oggeri, you're the co-founder of Innovafeed.
Yeah, exactly. Happy to be here.
So we have here two perfect examples, actually, of impact-driven technology and businesses. If I'm not mistaken, actually, Climate X is removing uncertainty around physical risks related to climate change through data analytics.
Yeah, it's a new type of data that's never existed in the marketplace before, so we predict the probability and severity of extreme weather events down to a specific location according to different climate change scenarios. So we can understand decades in advance what the likelihood is of severe damage to assets, to buildings, to infrastructure.
And the market is definitely global out there because the challenge is, of course, international.
Yeah, I think the world this year has been our microphone. So we've seen the floods that have been happening around Europe, in China, the extreme heat events, grid systems shutting down. The power of being able to predict these things in advance means that we can stabilize economies around the world and businesses, and that's really what we're about doing.
And when it comes to Innovafeed, Bastien, you're providing sustainable food systems by producing a new source of nutriments from insects rearing for animal nutrition. That is the very first purpose of Innovafeed.
Yes, exactly. So basically, we are breeding insects and transforming this insect into high quality protein and oil for the animal nutrition market, and tomorrow for the food market, so for human consumption. And so basically we are giving back to the insect the role it has in nature. So in nature you have an apple. This apple is mature and fall down. Some insect, worms come and eat the apple, and then birds and fishes come and eat these worms and insects. And that's exactly what we are doing at Innovafeed, but at industrial scale. So it's a mix between science, biotechnology, industry, and data.
So you have climate change out there, you have how to basically feed humanity on our left here. I mean, you guys are definitely the avengers of impact-driven tech to me. But if we do get the fact that impact-driven tech is definitely the new norm, how would you define it nowadays? Is it a commitment? Is it a business?
I don't think that there's a separation between the two, and there doesn't need to be. As far as the future economy and what that's going to look like, everybody knows that the growth areas will be in the green space. So the biggest companies in the world are being formed and incubated now. Whether it's going to be on the removal of carbon, the way that we manage our food, for example, and feed the planet, or in our case, it's data around understanding risk and understanding the planet around us and how do we live in that new environment. So the whole economy needs to be transitioned, and I think that there's a commitment to making sure that we're doing the right things in the right way. We're not trying to misrepresent the future in terms of trying to prioritize shareholder interests first, and there will be some knocks that will happen. But at the same time, as part of this transition, this is inevitable, right? And so either you have a managed transition to this new world, or you have a situation where you have these big spikes and these significant disruptions like we've seen with COVID. And I think with climate, one of the things that we know now, and the recent IPCC reports confirm, is we're not on a good trajectory. There needs to be a lot of changes that need to happen, and data is at the heart of everything. We need to understand what today's position is if we're going to then prepare for the future. And so I don't see there's an imbalance here. I think it's inevitable, and the more people that are working on this problem, the better it's going to be.
So Bastien, from your perspective, being profitable definitely rhymes with being also sustainable, right?
Yes, I think it's a condition. And in our case, when we decided to launch Innovafeed 5 years ago, it was a commitment to us to say we want to have an impact on the ecosystem, like to reduce the carbon intensity of our food production systems, or to reduce the impact of our food production system on the biodiversity. That was a clear mission that we had when we created Innovafeed. But in the same time, we wanted to have an impact. And to have an impact in our business, you need to be profitable. Because if you are not profitable, you will always rely on subsidy from public entity, from government, from European Commission, etc. And you will be limited in your impact. So you have to be profitable, and if you are profitable, you could scale up. You could rely on private finance, investors, but also banks. You could have support from corporate to help you to build your model, to build your technology, and it's a true condition. If you are not profitable, it will be far more difficult to have an impact, because you will always be at small scale, and the impact is in which direction you are going. And I'm pretty convinced that with Innovafeed, we are going in the right direction. We are reducing the impact of our food production systems. But the second aspect on the impact is the scale. If you go in the right direction but without scale, your impact will be very limited. And to reach scale, you need to be profitable at least.
So I do get the part where we're definitely all on the same boat, and everyone wants to bite or grab a bite actually of this very fruitful cake. I mean, investors, entrepreneurs, startups, scale-uppers, corporates, name them. But how are you guys making a difference out there? Because a lot of new kids are coming to the block, and you have both been working for years to actually come across those breakthrough technologies.
I would say that large corporates, governments are fundamental in terms of partnering with companies like ours to help us scale, to give us access to capital, to let us into new markets at a faster pace, right? If you are a startup and you stay small, as to the point Bastien was making earlier, then your ability to have impact is significantly reduced. Now, one of the things is a lot of the technologies that we're creating and the data sets that we're creating, for us specifically, they don't exist in the marketplace today. And because they don't exist in the marketplace, it's a very niche type of skill. If a large corporate wants to do it, A, it's not their business, it's not what they do day to day, but B, they need to be able to move quickly in terms of the changing environments around us, and the corporate machines aren't typically good at that. And so we're quite encouraged, because a lot of the large corporates or largest enterprises around the world are already speaking to us because they want to use our data. They really want to make a transition into this new world and understand what the future opportunities look like, what the future risks look like, and start to re-engineer their businesses, because they recognize that this transition is not going to happen overnight. These are decades worth of changes that need to be made if you're going to start to survive in the future. And so having access to that through projections, through data, is fundamental. And we're seeing the same encouragement from governments. So we're starting to see that governments and regulators, financial regulators, are mandating that companies of all sorts and types understand not only the effects that they have on climate change, but how climate change affects them. And this is transformational stuff. It means that the way that the financial systems work will change. So your ability to obtain a mortgage today will be very different to what it looks like next year. Insurances, everything's going to change fundamentally. And I think everybody across the entire economy needs to work in tandem to transition.
So if I do follow you quite wisely, it's just your challenge is probably not to fight climate change. Your challenge is definitely to come up and curate better data every single day.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest problems. Like, how do you predict or project climate risk 80 years into the future, right? So people will say to us, well, how is it possible? We can't see what the weather is next week. And we're not forecasting, we're not trying to predict the weather. What we're looking at is the conditions that it takes in order to create specific types of events. So we create a digital twin of the Earth. That's what we've done. And we'll say, how much water do I need to pour into this thing for a flooding event to occur? And when that happens, how is it going to happen? So we can see things like the velocity of the speed of water discharging across the surface, how far it's going to travel, how long it will last. It's incredible, the data that we can now create. And it's because computationally, it's accessible. Satellites, we rely a lot on satellite data for the things that we do. So satellite imagery, synthetic aperture radar, and so on. Commercially, you could not access that data in the scales and process it in the ways that we do 10 years ago. But that's all changing now. And I think this is one of the key transitions that's happening in this space, and why today we can start creating data that's really valuable for the world.
Interesting. Bastien, when it comes to Innovafeed, actually, you have a lot of different competitors on your field, and believe it or not, they're European and then the French. So how do you stand out from the crowd?
In fact, it's quite a good news that we have competition, because in the food production systems, we will face very strong challenges in the coming decades. We will change completely our food production systems. Basically, we need to produce more with less, more to match the global demand of additional protein driven by population growth and nutritional transition, but also to reduce the impact. Today, the food that you eat represents 1/5 of the total global carbon emissions. And if we want to match the 2 degrees trajectory, we need to reduce by 70% the carbon intensity of our food production systems. So to be able to tackle these challenges, we need to have several initiatives. And in the world of the alternative protein, we have different technology today emerging, like algae, fungi, alternative protein. That's a good news, because we will probably need all these kind of technologies to tackle this big challenge of the food production systems. And for sure, on every technology and on every company, you could have different pro and cons. And so we have some competition in the insect operation sectors. That's a good news for us, because also it's not a winner-take-all systems. We will have different competition in these ecosystems, because our clients need to be able to supply our product not only from one supplier, but for multiple suppliers. So we have for sure some competitive advantage compared to our competition, but we try not to work together to build a new way of solutions to tackle the subject.
So yes, competition is still good, even when it comes to the impact-driven tech ecosystem. And yes, it's actually an ecosystem. So could we probably mix and match your solutions to get a better holistic type of solution to fight whatever words as to, take on in terms of challenges?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of things. One is, I think it's rare, and it's in the impact world and climate world, where you get that response of competition is good, because you can never do too much to help move the needle positively as far as climate change is concerned. So it's rare to hear somebody say that, oh my God, I'm really frustrated that somebody else is in the market. It's actually a good thing. And it's innovation, right? Like, that's what's happening right now. And I think the work that Bastien's doing is the piece which is around how do you contribute, how do you stop contributing to the problem, right? So with the Paris Agreement, we know that for the next 3 decades, we're saying it's okay to make climate change worse, but we need to slow down and that transition. Where my stuff links into it is not to say that we're trying to stop climate change happening, is to say, well, actually, what are the consequences of climate change? What does that world look like? So I think these ecosystems with impact that also feeds into, and I think we shouldn't forget it, is human capital, like the way we treat people, around social governance, also the natural world and biodiversity. How do we look after the world and the planet around us? It's not just about the human environment and the built environment. But I think that these things can speak, and they do ultimately affect each other.
And Bastien would be able to actually use Lukky's data set solutions to predict, where you can actually create better insect-based food in the near future?
In fact, we have a team within Innovafeed to scout the different place and raw material deposit where we could implement a factory to transform these raw materials into high quality protein, and less related to climate and condition compared to where we could use and reuse byproduct from the agro industry, because that's the purpose of Innovafeed, is to be able to transform and to reuse a byproduct from an industry where the byproduct is not easily transformed and used.
So what's next on your map, on the roadmap out there, on the framework? I know that you guys at Innovafeed are just opening a brand new factory in the suburbs of Chicago.
Yes, that's true. So as I said, for us, the impact, which is the commission of Innovafeed, is linked to the scale of Innovafeed. So if we produce more factories, our impact will be bigger. And one factory, the one what we have in France, is 15,000 ton of carbon removed from the atmosphere in 1 year. So if we build 2, 3, 4 factories, we will have additional impact. So that's why today the objective of Innovafeed is to continue our deployment. And for instance, in the US, we will build a new factory near Chicago on ADM factory in collaboration with ADM. But we see that in this new world, we have quite good energy from investors, from corporates to move forward and to continue to deploy our technology and our innovation. And what is missing today, or not missing, but the fight of every day in our company is how we could recruit the right talent to be able to be as fast as we want, because for sure there is a place for 10 additional factory in the world, but now we need to have the brain and the arm and to be able to build all these factories in this world.
See, Innovafeed wants you as a new recruit. Lukky, actually, I mean, I guess your challenge too out there is to try to make your mind on what markets you're going to tackle. Because again, you are definitely fighting against a global challenge.
Yes, and I think this is one of the big challenges we'll face into next year. So the UK will be covered. Any part of the UK, we just need a longitude, a latitude, or an address, and we can give you this data. Now, next year we're going to start scaling into international markets. So we're thinking of where those places should be, because everyone is affected in one way, shape, or form. We do plan to be a 6-continent solution provider. We don't want to leave anyone behind. And so the questions are, do we go to the US? There's parts of Europe, and I don't look at Europe as Europe. I look at it as distinct different countries because of the risks that they face, the cultural regulation, etc. And then across Asia Pacific are some of the key sort of areas of interest. But yeah, we're allowing, I think, on our the first focus is get the UK done, and we're going to go live with our data. It's already being used by some large companies, and we'll see. The scaling side, I think, is similar to Bastien. We don't have a concern around the capital. A lot of VCs, institutional, want to get involved with that round, which is really positive. That enables us to actually meet those ambitions.
So to put it in a nutshell, or not, actually, impact-driven tech is a never-ending type of story, right? Because there's always something to fix in this world. But where do you see the future of this field heading?
I would say that everything on this planet is going to transition pretty much. It has to, it's inevitable. And so whatever you're doing is going to have some sort of impact. Whether it's good or bad impact is the question, and how much impact you want to have. But in the climate space, in my world, there's literally everything that you can imagine needs to be re-engineered, and there's a place for people. So I wouldn't shy away from it. I think there are a lot of cool startups out there, similar to Bastien's, that need help, and we're open for the conversations.
Bastien, how about you?
I'm quite optimistic, because a few years ago, when we speak about impact and green, it was mostly communication. But today, I think it's, for sure, there is still part of communication, but we see from investors, from banks, from corporate, that it's not only communication. They need and they want to transition toward carbon neutrality path, and Innovafeed is one of the solutions. So they try to make a place for Innovafeed. They try to change the way they do the analysis of the subject to be able to support a company like us. So I'm quite optimistic that it was purely communication, let's say, 10 years ago. Today, still a part of communication, but we also see true impact of this initiative from big corporate, and I'm pretty sure that we will see the emergence of new technology and new startup in the coming years, supported by this strong focus on impact that we could see today.
Well, good to know that greenwashing is over as our time actually on this stage. It's really difficult, to change the word and have this pressure on your shoulders. But I mean, those guys have been here for the past 20 minutes answering questions, so they definitely deserve some applause. Applause, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.